How do you know if you're getting lied to? There's a lot of relationship stuff going on with people right now at the end of the year. Relationships are really tough during the holidays. And a lot of people are going through some crazy times with people that are lying to them. That's been a theme lately in my practice. I notice I go through seasons with people, and some of it's infidelity with relationships. Right now, it's people that are getting lied to, and they're just not quite sure what to believe. So what are the signs of being lied to? How do you know if someone's lying to you? I'm going to give you some science about that today. And thank you for listening. And this is Kimile, and you are listening to Heal with Kimile podcast. So welcome back. But here's something to kind of pay attention to. And I had a person literally lie to my face, and I knew this person was lying to me recently. And just the interesting way they dealt with, this lie. I think she knew I knew she was lying, but she was not going to back down, not going to give up what she was lying about. So I asked a specific question, and she kind of did a handful of these things that I'm gonna give you now. So here's some signs, body language signs, if you're with someone and they're lying to you. If you ask someone a question and they're lying, they will typically turn their head position quickly, or they'll look away. But there's usually a head movement, sudden head movement, when someone's caught right there in a lie. So she did that. When I asked her a question, she turned her head. Her eyes were away from me. I could not see her eyes. Another sign that if someone's lying to you, they cannot look at you. It's hard to keep a gaze toward you. So they jerk their head quickly. Their breath changes. And she did this like she was trying to control her breath. And I watched her really manage that she wasn't getting agitated. Because when people lie, their blood pressure goes up. Their body's responding. It's like a stress response. The body knows that you're lying. And it doesn't feel good. So people that lie, they live in a stressful world. Their mind's going a mile a minute. It's hard to lie. We don't lie well. But the breath changes. So it's either more labored, more heavy, or it's more controlled, like they're trying to control their breath. And I watched her just, really try and slow her breath down. So I was like, okay, ping, ping, ping. There's those 3 checks. And there's usually a shift in their voice. Either their tone or their pitch might get higher, or they might get louder, like they're trying to control the situation with you, being really, really defensive, or a little aggressive, like they're, they're not saying it, but their energy is, how dare you, But there's usually some sort of verbal shift. Some people they start whispering like this because, they're uncomfortable. They know they're lying and they're afraid you're going to catch them. And so it's uncomfortable. But there was definitely no conversation. So when she turned her head, and she wouldn't talk to me at all. So I was just fascinated by this. I really saw a whole different side of this person. And I've known him for a long time. So I was just kind of surprised that, like, I'm lying, I'm sticking to it, and I don't care what you say. And, it might cost a relationship, right? Which you can't be with someone who lies to you like that. But there's a shift in the voice. And then there is a repetitive statement sometimes. She didn't do this. She didn't repeat herself over and over. But people that are lying are, trying to convince you, or they're trying to convince themselves. So they might repeat words or phrases to try to sell you on the story, whatever the story is. Or, this did happen with her, though. Some people just freeze up. They get really tense. They get really stiff. They're just frozen. They almost seem frozen, like they just don't dare move. When you're in a conversation with somebody, it's kind of natural to move around, and there's just a naturalness to it. It isn't stiff at all. But this gal stiffened right up. So it was interesting. Sometimes people will give you way too much information. They will overshare when they feel like they're, getting caught in a lie, or they don't, they're afraid you're going to see that they're lying to them. So they'll really, really go into some sort of long, drawn out story. It's in a way a little bit of a distraction. You've seen these videos probably online of police pulling people over or arresting someone. And I've seen that a handful of times. People get really overshare moment, and, they're just, so they just can't keep their mouth shut. They might touch or cover their mouth. And so if they're lying, they'll kind of maybe rub their nose, but there'll be some sort of gesture toward their mouth because they are uncomfortable. Another thing is they will shuffle their feet. Apparently, feet have a lot to do with a person's mindset. So if their feet are pointed toward the door, that's saying they want to leave. If they're pointed toward the person they're with, that says they want to be with that person. But if you have kind of a shuffling feet or a tapping foot, a nervous foot, right? That's an indicator of lying as well. And then there's the physical facial gestures or body gestures, like pointing at you or something that doesn't really match the conversation. It's just a little off. There's not a vibe that's the same. So it just feels weird. It's like a fake. Like people are fake, they seem fake when they're talking to you. It's like a fake smile or a fake mad or something like that. So the gestures don't match. And then sometimes they have this stare, like they don't blink or they overblink. So it's something about like their body's responding to the lie. And so they're blinking it away or trying to just lock down and stare, so you don't know. And then the famous one is that someone's getting really defensive and really mad that you're asking them this. And so it's like it's overkill because you're over the target. They're threatened by getting exposed. So those are some scientific physical signs that you can tell if someone's lying to you. I really had an interesting moment with someone it changed my opinion of them forever. But I asked a question and truly it was the frigid turn, look out, the window wasn't communicating with me and had a look of disgust on her face. And I just thought, wow, this is interesting. And not that I needed to be right about anything. I'm just concerned, is there a plan? Can I help with anything? I asked a specific question and just literally shut her down. So when you have those moments with people, that's usually a sign of someone that's been doing something maybe behind your back for a minute and they don't want you knowing their full plan. So they almost have to get away from you as quick as possible. And I really haven't spoken much to her, frankly, for a long time now. It's been a while. And I don't plan on speaking to her again. I figured it all out. I'm pretty intuitive. I can sort through people. I can understand what's really going on. So I figured some stuff out. But if you're in a relationship and you're just not quite sure if there's that truth between you, or maybe you've caught them in a lie, maybe a stupid lie, like, where they were having coffee with two people instead of just one, or it's like just simple things that they're lying about. That's something you want to pay attention to because they're wanting you to see them a certain way. They want to keep that perception of you and you to treat them a certain way. So they're softening things or they're changing narratives because they want to keep you under their spell or no conflict at all. So that's interesting when you find people have these little lies. There's usually a lot bigger lies behind that, right? And I do feel like the truth has a certain ring to it. And when you're living in alignment, when you're living in truth, I say that when people are kind of outside of truth, they're kind of away from alignment. If you're living a lie, your life doesn't work out. Like your life isn't working. And it could be, a lie of who you think you are. It could be someone lied to you and you believe them about yourself. You're worthless, you're no good. So you live your life like you are no good and you're worthless. That's living a lie. But when you live a lie and you're in this little bubble, so when someone kind of pokes at that bubble and tries to have a reality moment with you and you can't hear it and you watch someone go through this, like you're trying to confront something and they're in a fantasy world. They're in some sort of ultra universe and they're not going to come out of it and go along with your truth. They're going to stick in their own little world. When you have someone like that around you, it's very, very difficult to have a real relationship. Because a real relationship, there's got to be some grounding based on reality moments. And some people just can't be in reality. I've seen this a lot more over the years in my practice. Call it narcissism, call it, on the spectrum maybe, but the people live in their own little bubble. And when people are confronted by, well, maybe a surgery is not going to make you feel any different. This whole trans movement, we've had all these kids, and I've dealt with a handful of clients that are dealing with feeling like they're in the wrong body. And this to me is more of an emotional thing to work through before you do the permanent surgical revisions, right? But there's a whole world of emotional stuff going on before we get to that point. It's the inside out approach is what I like to do. I want to help them align with what's true for them. And look, people that they can't be in truth, they can't hear the truth, don't do well in therapy, by the way. They don't get a lot of results because they're living in their own fantasy world, and they're narrating, and changing the script in a way as they go. And what I find is they must not experience something. So whatever they must not experience, and usually it's, I must never go through that again. Whatever that is, whatever the moment of trauma or shock is, they've got this altered way of looking at life as a solution to that pain. Hopefully you're tracking. I'm trying to be clear about it, but it's like, I'd rather live this lie and believe this about myself or life than to live in reality and believe that. So it's a solution to their problem. It really is a fantasy world. So I have noticed that. I think the gaming world, I think all our gadgets, our phones, our screens, and then they had this thing on Snapchat. I believe you could actually be a man on the Snapchat or a woman on the Snapchat. So if you put your face on it, it would change you, right? I was fascinated by that too, but I was thinking all the while, these young kids are going through these phases, and if they don't have their identity figured out, all this social media cannot be good for them. Even adults, if we don't know who we are, if we're lost or something, we're going to get influenced by all this social media stuff. And it's where the world is going. AI is here to stay. It's not going to go anywhere. But I do feel like we as the Homo sapiens need to start identifying ourselves in truth. That seems to be the theme of my work, is if someone's living a lie or lying to themselves even about who they are or they want to be and they can't be, that person is not aligned with a natural life. And life is harder for those people that cannot align with truth. And when you tell the truth, it doesn't have a charge to it. I have a lie detector. It's kind of a biofeedback meter, and I put people on this meter. And I'll ask questions on the meter, and I call it my truth detector, right? Because when I ask a question and the truth comes out, the needle will fall to the right, which indicates, yeah, that's the truth. If the needle goes to the left, then that indicates someone is confused or they're in deception. They're just trying to deceive. So it's almost like people need to know where their true north is. And when people finally get to the truth of something, the pain is gone. I think it was Buddha. Buddha said, all form of pain begins with a wrong thought, which was living a lie, thinking that something is this way when it's really not. And I don't know if you know my story, but when I was 14, I ran over a guy on I was driving a tractor, and I didn't really know how to get it in gear. And I was trying to keep up with my dad. We were shaking pie cherries, and I had a bin of water on the back of the forklift tractor. It was a Ford. And I'm trying to keep up with him, and he was shaking these cherries so fast, and we had to get him in the cold water so they didn't start rotting. And I was 14. I mean, I had a 2-minute lesson. That's what we did on the farm. A lot of farm accidents happen, right? If you're a farm person, you understand. But I couldn't get it in gear. This worker came over and helped me put it in second and low. And okay, thank you. And I was ready to go. Well, it was muddy. He slipped, and I thought he had moved away. I'm focused on the gears. Well, I popped the clutch. The tractor just lurched. I mean, it leaped forward. And I looked down, and the big, huge tractor tire was literally up to his chest. Well, I couldn't breathe. I froze. I slammed on the brakes. I froze. Another guy went over and got my dad. My dad came over and replaced my footing and everything, and masterfully backed that tractor off this guy. Well, I didn't know if I killed him. I didn't know. I was 14. Whenever we'd talk about it, I would just burst into tears. I felt so guilty, so horrible. They raced him to the ER. Again, I didn't know. And they didn't want to upset me, so we didn't talk about it. So I was 16. And by the way, from 14 to 16, I truly went through hell. I was trapped in a fire. My sister got me out, saved my life. I was beat up by some girls. I feel like I was haunted. I had sleep paralysis. I would go to my then bishop and ask him to pray over me. I felt like, there was just darkness around me all the time. And I'd hear sirens, and I'd think, they're going to come get me. They're coming to get me because I was a killer. I killed this guy, And I'm 14, and we just don't talk when we're 14. So I didn't know what to do, and I was just tired of crying. I didn't get a lot of sleep. And I went through 2 years of absolute torture. So I went to my dad. He was watching the Raiders football, eating this, cup of peanuts. He cracked his peanuts open. And I just, on a commercial, said, Dad, I want to ask you a question. He said, what? I said, I want to know where that guy's buried so I can take him flowers. I just want to go say sorry. He said, who are you talking about? I said, the guy I killed. He said, what? You didn't kill anybody? I said, yeah, the guy I ran over on the farm. And he kept looking at me, blinking like, oh my, like realizing I had believed that I killed this guy, right? He said, you didn't kill him? He had surgery. We shipped him back to his family. He was okay. He was walking like, but I lived in a world for 2 years that I ran that guy over and I killed him. So I was not living in alignment. I was not living in truth. I was living this lie. And so because I was a killer, I never dared. The tractor was scary to me. I was not going to get back on that tractor. My Messianic experience was I am not getting on that tractor again. And my dad said, yes, you are. Like, we need your help. So he forced me to get on that tractor again. And I practiced and practiced. I'm a damn good tractor driver now, I might add. But I really know how powerful getting out of living a lie is, okay? And pain, mental pain especially, emotional pain, typically comes from believing a lie. And when the truth gets told, well, my dad said to me, you didn't kill him, Kimmy. You didn't kill him. And it's just the reality of, oh my God, my daughter thinks she's a killer. I know he was just like tortured thinking, oh, I wish I would have said that. So it was true, but it was such a relief. The truth does set you free, right? I was so relieved. I can't even tell you the freedom. Oh, I didn't kill him. So all of that self-punishment, I believe I was attracting to myself. I needed punishment. I'd done something wrong. I hurt this person. I wanted to pay. I wanted to make amends. And then to realize that I didn't do that. It did turn, thank God I found that out, because I don't know what I would have done to myself. But really, when I finally started, feeling that truth, and by the way, in 2 years, I talked to God every second. I walked, ate, slept, prayers. I was on my knees all the time, begging God for forgiveness. Like, I began seeking. I was seeking for relief. I was just tortured. And that's really when I feel like I began, spiritual gifts or feeling intuitive, because I've always had this ability to kind of feel and see things. So I really think it ratcheted up as a result of me thinking I was such a horrible person. I was such a sinner. And I was really starting to seek God and seek just relief. I needed relief. I've got other stories about this too, but I was led to pray and led to God. When the truth comes out, it sets us free. When people have gone through betrayal or horrible relationship breakups and stuff, and then you have time and perspective to look back on it, you're like, I bet this whole time they were this and this. You kind of realize the truth. And then things do calm down. People always say, oh, you got to forgive for yourself. Forgiveness seems natural when you understand people, you understand the situation, you understand what really happened. You can forgive when you realize what really happened. That's my thing. I'm just going to forgive and not understand it. I got to understand it before I can let it go. But I'm really, really working on a project right now about helping people get back to living true to themselves. And living true means living true to your calling, living true to who you really are, getting over these misconceptions or the identity that we get handed when we're living and growing up, that something's wrong with us, or you got to be thin to be pretty, or just whatever we took on as adolescents that we believed about ourselves, that's living a lie. And as long as you believe that about yourself, you're going to put yourself in hell like I did. So I do think my mission and my purpose with my clients, honestly, is to getting them back on track in their life. Like I got, put back on track when I realized I wasn't a killer. And that really does matter. I think it matters that you see yourself accurately. But there's so many people that are living in this fantasy because they don't dare realize, or they can't face the truth, whatever the truth is. And the truth's probably a lot easier. If you think, oh, I'm in the wrong body, or I'm in the wrong person, or I shouldn't be this, or I should be that. You've sentenced yourself to something. And so you're not going to be able to feel pretty or be happy or be wealthy until something gets fixed or something gets worked out, or you have a surgery or something. I'm just going to tell you that's not true. Like, all of that is the lie, because it's always a future moment that has to happen before we really get peace or whatever we're after. You can have that feeling right now. You can have that moment right now if you just want to be able to be honest with yourself and tell the truth. And people are so hard on themselves, I was so hard on myself. And people that find me, that I find in my world, there's just, when people are stuck in some sort of lie, it just seems to surface around me. And I think it's because I went through what I went through, just realigning with yourself, getting life realignment back to where you're living true, living your purpose, not doing things you don't want to do anymore. I can't tell you how many men I've got in my practice that, they're just killing themselves for all this money. And I mean millions. I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't work. We got to pay bills, right? But I mean millions of dollars because their wife has a spending habit and he's not going to get laid. He's not going to get love until he gives her all this money. I had this one guy tell me he would pay like a $40,000 American Express bill every month. She'd call it retail therapy. I need it because I'm so unhappy. So his job was to provide money for her to get happy, but it didn't work because she was never happy. She needed to spend that every month. That was her. So that never made her happy, or she would have got happy and quit doing it, right? So just interesting how we do things. We're motivated by things, But what if you could just stop and tell yourself the truth and start living in truth and not living this lie? And maybe what you believed about yourself, what you believe about yourself right now is someone else's version of you, and it's really not true. Now, that's the kind of stuff I want to dig at with people, is just to figure out what is really bothering you, what is really motivating you, what's really driving you to do what you do, be who you are. Because all of the stuff comes from our environment, all the stuff comes from our stories. And if you want to change, look, you got to get back in alignment. You got to get back to the truth of who you are and what you are and why you're really here. And everybody has that. Look, everybody is here for a reason. We all have a calling. Not one of us doesn't have a calling. But if you don't know what that is, it usually starts with your misery, because your misery, when you sort that out, becomes your ministry. And my ministry is to help people get back to the truth of who they really are. And when you know who you really are, you can hear, you can tap in, you're aligned with purpose, and you live true to who you're meant to be. So that's kind of in a nutshell what I do. And it all begins with a lie. And when you clean up all the lies, the truth does set you free. So if you want to get set free, if you want to sit and talk to me and kind of get realigned with your truth, maybe you don't even know where you went off. Maybe you don't know where you're off the reservation and you're kind of living a lie. Maybe you don't know. I can help you figure that out. You can get a hold of me at my website at healwithkimile.com. That's HEAL with KIMILE.com. I hope this helped. Thanks for listening.